What's the counterintuitive truth that you see when it comes to core values that maybe people from the outside or who haven't done the same level of work that you've done, maybe they don't see it the same way, or they would hit some sort of roadblock that you can help us get past just based on the 25 years of your work?
People get confused between values and ideals.
Mm.
And this is where many companies go wrong. They put a list of ideals up on the wall in some boardroom or in the foyer of their building. And one, people don't know what they mean. Two, people don't know how to bring them to life. Three, the organization doesn't make decisions based on collaboration and kindness and teamwork. They make decisions based on financial performance.
Yeah, that
So
would be the
do
core
we
value,
really
right?
value?
Put that on the wall.
Well, that's exactly what I've been saying
Yeah.
to organizations, to CEOs. Don't pretend to value these three things if you're not actually going to bring them to life. If you if you value financial performance above all, and that should, as a responsible CEO, you want to ensure the sustainability of your organization, put that up on the wall. And you don't have to say finance, you could say growth, but at least it's explicit and it's clear. We make decisions based on growth. We make decisions then based on teamwork, and then we make decisions based on community. Great. Now people are going to trust you and you're much more authentic. So I think being clear, is this an ideal? Is this how I want to live? Or is this who I really am? That's an important distinction.
Bradley Hook, welcome to Undercurrents. Thrilled to have you.
Benji, thank you. Great to be here.
You lead the Resilience Institute. You have written several books, but the one that I became aware of that was like, man, I got to have Bradley on the show was your latest, which is Start with Values. Talk to me about the heart behind the work that you do and why these are the topics, resilience, values, that you're like, man, I want to spend my life talking about and helping others with this. Like, why these topics?
It's because it's what I needed most in my 20s and my 30s. I was navigating life semi-successfully, often going down the spiral, experiencing extreme burnout, wondering, why can I not succeed? What's the secret to sustainable high performance and actually just having a positive impact in the world? And I realized along the way that you can't just leave this to chance. If you can be intentional and deliberate about discovering what matters to you and then aligning your behaviors with those values and then enabling the behaviors with a good dose of resilience, you can start to step in the right direction. It's not always going to be perfect, but it helps you focus on what matters most in the moment. It helps you get some momentum. So I found that these tools were things that I really needed in my own life, and they've helped me and continue. I don't think values or resilience are a destination. It's a journey. We're always going to have to adapt. We're always going to have to add new tools to the toolbox of skills that help us. And that keeps me super engaged.
Remember years back, the founder of Netflix came out with a book. And when that book went live, he endured some level of scrutiny because some documents from behind the scenes of the beginning of Netflix came out where he basically was like, hey, there's a lot of language in business right now. If you rewind, you can remember back to this where it was like business was using a lot of family language, where we're like a family. And they went this authentic route of saying, hey, we're not a family. Straight up, like that's not what we value. If you work here, and for some people that's a turnoff, right? But to your point, this is what our culture actually is. And so when you bring that to personal values, I do think a lot of times there's this misalignment between, well, we wish we were this way, but we're not actually like making decisions to, like, let's say live into our agency, or if we were to pick a word like audacity, right? That sounds really cool. You're going to have these audacious dreams and goals, and then our life proves otherwise, and then this misalignment leads us to sort of some level of distress where it's like, I say that this is what I want, but it's not actually what I live out. Maybe I just give up on my values, just like a New Year's resolution. So is that getting to what you see often?
Yeah, absolutely. And remembering that there are seasons in life, there are times when adventure and curiosity and freedom are your core values, usually when people are in their 20s. And then it starts to become more about perhaps earning money and generating wealth and being respected. In fact, in my book, I've got this values pyramid that kind of explains this. There are times when you need to revert back to survival values, really just focus on securing the basics. And then maybe you want some belonging, you want to feel connected. Maybe you're seeking a life partner, maybe just some friends. Growth values, I want to master new skills, I want to find my flow state. Impact values, where it's I actually want to be recognized for all of this work that I've done. I actually want to be paid properly and I want some level of prestige. And then fulfillment values. And you notice people progress naturally over the course of their lives. But when people become too rigid and stuck to, I value wealth, well, it can start to feel a little empty when you get to your mid 40s, maybe your 50s, and you start going, wow, my time is running out. And what about the family that I've neglected? Or what about the friendships that are no longer there? So being really open to ask yourself at least once per decade, what is really most important to me now and will become important to me in the next decade?
Yeah. I want to go to impact values for a second. I want to ask you a
Yeah.
question, kind of double click into that because one thing it, as you're talking, it's triggering in me is like when someone would bring a word like fame, or even if you were to take impact and say like, I want, one of the things that I'm going to measure my life by, one of the things I want to lean into, I want to have an impact on other people. If that in a certain period of your life can very much come from just like, I want external validation. So you communicate it as, I want to have an impact, but two people could say that and mean vastly different things. One person is saying, essentially, it's a warning sign. Don't go into that, because if you do, you're really doing it because you ultimately just want raving fans, and you'll never have enough of those raving fans because there's like this internal thing you're trying to fill. There's another version of impact where it's like, hey, even if no one finds out about what I'm doing, uh, I'm cool with it. I want to have a deep level impact. Or I think about, as people get older, you mentioned family, those close to you. Like, I want to have an impact on a small circle of people at a very deep level. And so it's almost like you could pick the same core value, but have vastly sort of different results. How do you work with people to sort of spot, is this an external versus an internal motivation? Because it gets tricky, right?
It comes down to how much control do you have over the outcome?
Yeah.
Because if you're leaving the outcome in other people's hands and you haven't necessarily done all of the work yet, well, you're going to be quite disconnected from that value and from the ultimate outcome. So there are many ways to live in alignment with values, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, but people might say, I just want to be remembered as a great parent. I mean, that's a noble thing, and that means you have control over the actions that might lead to it, but you still ultimately it's extrinsic because it's other people that are going to be doing the remembering. So I think there are many ways to live in alignment with your values. One thing that I try not to do is become morally judgmental about how people get there. Of course, there are extreme examples of values alignment taken way too far at the detriment of civilization. Um, but at the same point, I try not to judge when I talk to people and they say, I want to be rich. Okay, you can ask why
Yeah.
and try and dig into what is the reason behind this. And often what they value most is freedom or autonomy. Now, that's a much more clear target because you can put in place some tools and some habits and some practices that step by step will lead you in the direction of autonomy. So I think when people just get surface level values around impact, it's important to dig deeper and try and understand, why do you want the riches? Is it because you just want numbers in your bank account? Or is it because you want to be a philanthropist? Or is it because you just want to be free of having a job?
Great values also, from my experience, make me more present. I don't know if you would, how you've experienced this, but I'll just say in my story, core values work hit me at a time where, very similar to you, until 2020, values were just like, oh, the thing that businesses have on the wall that's kind of not relevant, whatever. Then through like a season of depression and having to figure out where am I, which way is up, values became this very freeing, aligning, proof of agency sort of thing. Like you get to choose, and this is what matters most, and move in this direction. But if you, to your point, if you kind of, I don't want to say pick wrong, but let's say that there is something like impact or rich, right? It can, that value can say, someday when I'm rich, someday when I've helped this many people, then I will feel fulfilled. Then I will feel, and I feel like what you're leaning into there, and what I would definitely co-sign and get behind, is when you actually identify your values, they call you into the present in a way that's super unique to say like, oh, actually, if I'm valuing connection, or if I was to value freedom, those are things I can actually actively step into today.
Yeah. You got it. That's such a good insight. And for me, values need to be active tools that we can use in everyday life to shape how we behave, how we act, how we react in this moment. So, for example, if I know one of my values is creativity, okay, it can sound a little abstract, could sound a little ideal, but if I can reframe it into I am a creative person, now we can apply the atomic habits kind of methodology to this and say, so what am I going to do every single day to be creative? And this creativity, if you build it into your routine, one, it's going to make you feel more fulfilled, because instead of just blindly doing urgent work, you're creating a pocket of time to match your skills to a challenge, maybe even finding a bit of flow state, which is intrinsically rewarding. It feels great. And you're getting some momentum. Or if I say, I value fitness, okay, let's say I'm a fit person, identity-based values. And now every day I secure that 1 hour for exercise. Well, I can tell you what, by the end of the year, you're going to be fitter, you're going to be living your values, you'll never regret the fact that you've dedicated the time to something that's really important, and it enables you to say no. You can use it as a decision-making tool. There's a meeting, it's really important, it's at the time of your yoga class. You know what? No, it's going to have to wait. And this creates confidence, and confidence in oneself is so important. It creates a level of trust within you and others. It's integrity. So values aligned action day to day, I think, is the key. And then being flexible to say, hey, fitness is so embedded in my routine now. What's something else that I really value that I want to work on about myself? Oh, it's family. Let's apply the same principle. I'm going to spend 5 minutes with my daughter every evening, and then it becomes 10 minutes, and then it's an hour every single day. And now I am a family oriented person.
Personal core values, when you're saying that, it could sound like navel gazing. Like I'm just analyzing myself. I'm sitting, for me personally, it would be like in a coffee shop somewhere, and I'm thinking about who I want to be, and I'm journaling about it. But the truth is that values, if you're actually in the application process of like living out what you were just saying, it's all actually it's lived in community. It's lived around other people. You only know if your values are actually your values when you're confronted by real life and other people and hard situations, whatever. But I think there is a piece to core values that's super important to just say, we're not just saying go sit with a list somewhere and dream up who you wish you were. In fact, I would say do this with other people, and get accountability in this, because you don't want to just get into this place of navel gazing. It could actually make certain things worse. I wonder what your experience is with that, or anything you want to add or reject in what I just said.
You can become very narcissistic, and you can become very insular. Like, well, I value these three things and I think about them all the time. And in my book, I include ways to integrate your values into your environment.
Mhm.
So perhaps you turn your house into a kind of meditation space, and you're just so values aligned, but you're actually not doing anything out there in the world. I think that it's great to connect with your values. Self-reflection is really important. Values can make you way more present in your day-to-day life because you know what matters and when to say no. And especially in terms of, what am I consuming? Obviously food, but information as well. Like, do I need to be scrolling for 2 hours a day, potentially absorbing what other people value? Or can I get out there into the world and bring my values to life and do something important? So, absolutely, you can get trapped in self development. And I've seen many people become so trapped in the self development world that they never actually do anything. They say, when I just learn that one more skill and that one extra mindset and attend that one more workshop, I'll finally start to do something. And that's certainly not what this is all about. I want to empower people so that they feel like, okay, at least I've got some clarity. As my mentor, Ian Hutchinson, used to say, clarity creates control. It enables you to define what the next best step is. And that's what it's all about. It's certainly not about sitting all day and going, do I really value freedom or do I value safety? No, let's just get on with life and get out there. And I like what you said about uncovering them collectively. Ask your friends, what do you think I value? Ask your spouse if you have one, or your partner, like, what do you think I value? And they might give you some insights that you didn't realize. You might think you value freedom, but in fact you value autonomy, as an
Yeah,
example.
that's good.
Yeah.
I would love for each of us to give away just a quick story of how values has either maybe changed the way we make decisions or just like at a very personal level. For me, values hit me in a place because I grew up in a very religious home. And so the house that I grew up in was very actually communal. The value of church, the value of those types of communities is that like a lot of times you're around a lot of people and you actually have pretty strong, like we shared meals, we had people over at our house very often, whatever. So as a kid, my community was strong, but my agency was weak. And so when I got into a place where I felt very depressed and actually like what I believed was up in the air, and I'm like, who am I as a person essentially in this whole season of COVID? There was a million things happening. In that season, I realized, oh, I don't even know if I ever thought through what the word agency meant. I don't even know if in the entire time that I was being brought up, if it was ever valued in my house to have real like autonomy. But the truth is that when you go study development, the best way to show up in community is to actually know what you value. So it's really hard, even though I grew up in community, to stand on anything, right? And that's what's the beauty of finding agency and then going into community is that you actually know what you stand for and you bring that, and it actually allows other people to do the same. And so that's why I feel like the blessing of growing up for me was that I saw the power of community. And now I actually went to the side of, oh, but with agency, I can show up in community as myself instead of chameleoning. I know what I actually value. And so I actually show up better for others from that place. And so I share that just to say, like, for me, it's simple. It's like, okay, we're, going into 2026. Before I'm writing goals for 2026, I'm writing and remembering what my values are because my goals are going to flow from that. Right. And so that's just a really easy, uh, decision making tool as I go into the new year where it's like, okay, really practical. Don't have to sit here and navel gaze all day, but I say I want X goal. Does it align with any of my values? If it doesn't, maybe need to rethink the goal. So that's a practical way that I've seen it be valuable. But I'm curious what stories come to mind for you, or things from the last few years where just like at a personal level. Obviously, you're talking to other people about it, but you're like, man, I love this aspect of values and how it's helped me, bettered me.
Definitely. I love your example as well. And I think that's a missing piece is that community. Communities do prescribe certain values to us, and that can be such a relief. And you see people really seeking meaning in the world, and that's why some shift toward religious practices, some shift toward ancient wisdom. You see this resurgence of Stoicism.
Yep.
Um, some people search for it in science, but this is a bit of a problem because science doesn't necessarily have values except for perhaps the scientific method.
Yeah,
And that can
discovery
be
maybe,
skewed.
curiosity,
Yeah,
maybe.
curiosity, exactly. So a lot of people are reverting back to religion to find community, or even just finding local groups and connecting on that basis. I mean, we see a lot of polarization in the world. People are searching for something to belong to. So in my own life, I would say values clarity has enabled me to stop being a people pleaser. And people pleasing is an interesting thing. It often comes from trauma as a young person. You go through difficult situations and you realize that the most important thing is to keep the peace.
Mm.
Just smooth things over, because any threat to the stability or the harmony is a threat to you. And so I think as I said, there was a season in life for just really trying to make everyone happy, but it often comes at a sacrifice to your own well-being, because you're the one up at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 1 a.m., trying to do things to satisfy someone else. And the interesting thing is, for me, it was a great learning experience. I was there and I did everything, and it helped me to progress in my career. I think it certainly can. But at a certain point, that authenticity that comes from knowing who you are and that agency that it gives you actually creates more trust and appreciation in those in your environment. They go, oh, you're a person who really knows what's important to them. You say no to me sometimes. Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
that's impressive. And that's what it has done for me.
Mm. We talk about counterintuitive. There's one of them, right? Because you just kind of go, people pleasing comes from such a good place of like, and then it gets taken sort of to this extreme where it's like, man, I really want people to like me, but then it's like all the way to my detriment, all the way past being who I actually am, saying no to anything. Uh, if you're internally, you probably know what some of your values are, and you're stepping over those boundaries over and over again. And it takes like a lot of practice to,
Yeah.
in a moment where you used to do one thing, right? You've charted the same path over and over again. Then you're saying, I'm going to state a new course and I'm going to actually stick to it. And these people that knew me this way now are going to know me this way. It's scary at first, but to your point, and I could say this absolutely is true. The more that I've chosen to actually say what I need to say and stick to my values and all of that, it's actually made my community stronger. Very few people have fallen off, and typically the people that aren't appreciative of it we're probably taking advantage of that people pleasing in me.
It's true. Yeah.
Mm.
And that community, it's also important to be able to lean on your values to just fact check whether the community is taking you in the right direction. Because we join movements and we join causes and we join religions. And at some point, it's important to be able to say, I'm not so sure about this. This is causing me a level of distress. Let me just fact check it against what matters to me and make sure that I'm still on the right path.
Okay, let's talk about
I
resilience.
agree.
Instead of just asking my own question, I did post on Instagram saying that I was going to be interviewing you, and that some of the work that you're doing is around resiliency, and that's something you've studied for a number of years. And one of the questions that came back to me is from my friend Barbara, and I thought it was really, really well stated. So there's sort of two parts to this. The first, obviously, is we need to talk about what resiliency is. So we'll get to her question in a second. First, maybe just from your work, how do you simply define what resilience is?
Resilience, from the perspective of Resilience Institute, and there are many perspectives, is a learned set of skills that enable us to bounce forward through challenge, to secure our well-being and the energy required for the demands of our busy lives, and to perform with care for ourselves and with others, maybe even beyond that into the community and the planet. So it's a set of skills or capabilities that enable you to thrive, not just survive. So our view is more holistic than just grit, and it implies growth through challenge, much like the concept of anti-fragility as coined by Nassim Taleb, which is the ability for an organism to not just bounce back, but to grow stronger because of the stressors.
If resiliency is a muscle that we're trying to grow, how do we participate in the growth of that resiliency personally? And then, yeah, let's just go personal. How do we grow that muscle?
Foundation is rest and recovery. Every professional athlete will tell you this, that their recovery process is as important as the practice. So, and that's the missing element for many of us, is that we're always on, we're experiencing chronic stress, And we wonder why we're gradually finding our focus eroding. We're down that spiral, feeling some primal states like fight, flight, freeze. So, first and foremost is ensure that your well-being basics are supporting your recovery. And often the easiest place to start for 90% of the people we work with is sleep. And companies go, really? We thought that we're burning out, and now you're talking about using our devices in that last hour before bed? Yes, because the blue light from the screens depletes your melatonin. It's more difficult to secure a quality sleep. You're getting 5 hours per night. You're waking up feeling fatigued. It's difficult focusing. It's everything is interwoven in this experience of life. So we've also developed some tools to help people understand like which factors are your strengths and which are your risks, if you want to get really scientific about it. But for most of us, we can intuitively say, well, where are the energy leaks in my life and what fills my bucket? So the practices can be different for everyone, but there are some foundations, which is sleep well, learn how to calm the nervous system, understand those primal states that we all enter, fight, flight, freeze, know what tips you into those states. It's usually overload. And then what practices have you got to support your energy levels? Are you fitness, movement, nutrition, your emotional intelligence, connection with others, and what cognitive skills have you got? Are you able to be agile in different situations? Are you creative? Can you even just focus the mind? I mean, a recent study suggests on average we can stay focused for about 47 seconds as adults. So that's about the length of your average reel, which is interesting. But yeah, what can we do to build that attention control? So it's not like there's one entry point. Everyone starts somewhere different because we've all developed different skills. And resilience naturally increases with age. That's something that we've discovered in our research. However, you don't have to wait to be 60 and feel more purposeful. You can start implementing some of the practices at age 10.
Yep. Okay. There's 19 questions I want to ask you, but I'm just going to
Please.
read the interaction I had with her on Instagram so that I'll give you the full context. It's just 3 messages back to back to back, and then I'll let you go wherever your mind takes us. So she said, I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this question, but I feel like resilience is a skill that less people have in their arsenal now. So how can we help others cultivate resilience? So this is sort of an outward facing question. So then I clarified, are you saying from like younger generations, they seem less sure of how to cope? How do we both become resilient and encourage others to do the same? And then here's her last text. She said, I think for sure younger generations have a better awareness of their emotions and their mental health and how to express some of that, which I appreciate. But I think we also, and she would say they also need the resiliency piece, which I think it was interesting what you said at the end there, that as you get older, you get more resilient. So I'm curious how you would respond to that text.
Great timing. I've just conducted a research study where we've looked at over 8,000 people from around the world to understand resilience by age, by gender, by location, and which skills and tools are most relevant in today's world. I think absolutely. Young people have always struggled with this. Some people, the research says the prefrontal cortex, which is where willpower comes from,
Right.
and it's not fully developed till 25. So that's one lens on it. I know when I was younger, I was really experiencing emotional extremes, a lot of anxiety. I didn't even have a word for what anxiety was. However, nowadays, I think we're much more connected to what these phenomenons mean. And maybe some of them are amplified by social media because we're more connected than ever before. When I was 18 or 19, I just had a group of friends,
Right.
male friends, and we would sometimes we'd never talk about emotions. I mean, I grew up in South Africa, but you'd talk about your positive emotions. Wow, that wave that you surfed was epic. Nice
Right.
one. And that was about the extent of it. Now I can go so deep into the neuroscience and the neurophysiology of what's happening to me. And I think we can get a little bit lost there as well, instead of just, you know, regulating those emotions. So it turns out that the number one skill that would give us the most benefits individually and collectively is emotional regulation. And that's just being able to name the emotion, which many of us are quite good at, but then be able to tame the emotion. Because if the emotion starts to become too intense, we may experience that fight, flight, freeze, or it may even be a subtle version of fight, flight, freeze. The anxiety, the worry, future based thinking, rumination drags us into the past, and we're anywhere except for the present moment where life is happening. So, being able to recognize it, self awareness, and then being able to say, okay, that is anxiety. I am feeling anxious because of that behavior. Suddenly, I've shifted to the prefrontal cortex and I've given myself some agency in this moment. And that's a critical tipping point rather than just allowing that emotion to continually wash over me without any feeling of, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to control it. Maybe tomorrow it'll go away and be better. So I think that awareness first, and then regulation second. And there are many tools around this: tactical calm in breath work exercises, even just the ability to name it, called affect labeling, is important. And then nudging towards positivity and not the toxic Pollyanna optimism. It's like, well, what's one small thing I could do right now to gain some agency or gain some momentum, and focusing the mind on that. So I think that's where I would recommend starting.
Yeah, all of that is really good. I often wish that emotional regulation was something that had been taught when I was in school. I think we're all fumbling through adulthood. I see a day with the visionary, the hopeful in me sees how much language there is now around these topics, and sees a day where, maybe our kids can't imagine the fact that we grew up when we didn't have emotional regulation classes, because there's so much de-escalation that can happen. You even think about conflict between people. Obviously, there's the whole benefits of what it does internally just to you, but you think about all of the fighting and I mean, literally at a national level, wars that could be stopped if we just understood emotional regulation. So I love that. I wonder if you were talking to, let's talk to the parents specifically who have kids in their home, right? Because we could talk about how we would try to do this more broadly, but I think this makes it better and more specific. You're raising a kid. I think it's hopeful to hear you say, as you get older, you just also become more resilient, right? You've faced more of life, you've had more opportunities, more reps. So I think that's hopeful. But what would you advise maybe is like some starting points to encourage resilience? What are the conversations maybe you have, some questions you ask? What would you point people towards?
It's important to model the behaviors you would like to see in your kids. I hear parents saying, "I just want to get my kids off that phone." Okay, well, who bought them the phone? And what do you do all evening and every spare moment? Oh, I just pick up my phone and scroll. Well, you're modeling the behaviors that they're going to ultimately emulate.
Right.
So I think there's be the change you want to see in your home is important. Model calm under pressure, model emotional regulation, and describe what you're doing. So I've got an 11-year-old daughter, and she makes fun of me all the time. She's like, "Oh, here we go. Daddy's going to talk about, shifting his emotional state," and I love it. It's great. It's super fun. But actually doing it in real time and being able to say, I am feeling sad because of that behavior, or I'm feeling a little worried because I've got this big presentation coming up on Friday. And she gets into that and we can brainstorm. And she started using some of these tools. Like she said, I'm feeling anxious because my bicycle day is tomorrow and I'm not that confident. I haven't been riding bicycle. Okay, great. You've just named it. And how are you feeling about it now? Well, actually, it should be okay. Well, is there anything we can do in real time? So it's about connection and it's about communication and talking through these practices. And I think a big part of being a parent and building resilient kids is to help them develop habits that are going to support them through their life. Like, bedtime is a time for recovery. So either side, there are boundaries. In the evening for that last 60 minutes, we're all putting down our phones and we're going to connect. And in the morning, there's a little bit of a buffer time before we get into the busyness. modeling these rhythms, because rhythm is so important. We're so connected to the rhythms of day and night and of the
Yeah.
seasons and even ultradian rhythms, peaks of alertness and recovery throughout the day. This is a great place to start without getting too cognitive and trying to be a psychologist for your child and being a helicopter parent and wrapping your kids in bubble wrap. Like, let them fail. Let them have an outburst and go and have some time out to self-regulate without you going in there and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sad that you're sad." And of course, every parent journey is different, but there are some basics. Modeling calm under pressure, naming emotional states, showing that you experienced distress in your life and how you overcame it. So I went to a workshop. I wasn't prepared. It didn't go that well, but I told them, what I'm going to do is run a second one. Okay, daddy doesn't just give up.
Yep.
Okay, he kept trying and not always trying to be a rescuer.
Barbara, hopefully that answers your question. If you have more follow-up questions for Bradley, I'll just say go to his LinkedIn and you can DM him and you can pester him with your follow-up questions if I didn't ask it good enough. I loved that. I think that was a really good a little segue on resilience. So here's how I want to tie a bow on this. I want to be respectful of your time. I feel like we can't leave this episode. We can't let the audience kind of stop listening before we say, how are these two things connected, right? So ultimately, values and resilience, there's definitely a lot of overlap there, but take that wherever you want to as far as how you see these things playing out together.
Absolutely. And another word that gets thrown in the mix sometimes is purpose. And
That's a good one. Yeah.
some people are really clear about their purpose. For most, it's kind of emergent. I think that you might know where you're going, and that's goal oriented. So if you think of a GPS system, it's like your purpose is where you're going. Sometimes we're not 100% sure, and that's okay. We take the scenic path. Our values can give us more clarity about how we get to wherever we're getting. So making sure that we don't miss out, we don't take the express road and miss out on family and connection and kindness and creativity, whatever's important to each of us. So values are the path and resilience is the enabler, because living a values aligned life is not always going to be easy, but at least you're clear about what matters to you. And so there are going to be moments where you need to practice breath work, tactical calm, as you just described beautifully. So knowing that before I step into my home environment, because I value family, I'm going to calm my nervous system. And this is a tool straight out of the resilience playbook. So in for 3, out for 5, activates the vagus nerves, brings me to a state of coherence. I walk in and I'm a more calm, present father or parent. I'm on the journey of well-being. Okay, well, I realize that I'm not going to leave my fitness to chance. I'm going to put in place some micro habits straight out of the resilience playbook and gradually upscale those that work with me. I mean, there was a person who valued fitness, and he was in one of my workshops and he said, I just love being fit, but I had a terrible injury 10, 15 years ago, and my shoulder ripped and I've never worked out again. I said, what did you used to do? He said, bodybuilding. I said, can you do a push-up? And he said, I can do 5. So I said, what is a habit that's already reliable? And he said, making coffee every morning. And I said, what time? 7 a.m. What if you do 5 push-ups just while you wait for your coffee to brew? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and the workshop continued. I later discovered that 4 years later, he presents his own story of transformation. In year 1, he did 1,825 push-ups, which is 5 every morning while waiting for coffee. In year 2, he was feeling pretty good, so he doubled it. He was doing 10. So he did 3,650 push-ups. In year 3, he added on 5 minutes of meditation and 5 minutes of stretching. In year 4, he rejoined the gym. He went to yoga. He was a completely transformed person, lost all of this weight, had never been happier. But it started with micro habits. And I think that's what resilience can bring to enable values aligned action.
Bradley, thank you so much for being on Undercurrents, man. Where is the best place for people to find the book and to connect with you?
So my website, bradleyhook.com, has got all of the links. On Instagram, it's just Brad Hook, and on LinkedIn, you'll find me, Bradley Hook, if you search me. So I'd love to connect with anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. We're talking about values. We're talking about creativity. We're talking about resiliency. All these topics are things that are near and dear to my heart, and would love for you to stay connected on the YouTube channel. All right. Till next time. Cheers.
Thanks, Benji.